thanks. I don't think I'll stand up either. It doesn't really seem necessary. Can you all hear me? Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, Peter and I are presenting some work we did last year around the impact of pledge campaign and giving publicity on people giving to charity. So we'll just go through and talk you through the randomised control trial that we did and present our results. The background to this is there's been a fair bit of work done across behavioural economics, psychology and social marketing around this idea around commitment. You know, that if and the idea is that there's a strong pressure on people internally to behave in a way that's consistent, to behave in a way that's kind of consistent with how they see themselves, and that strand goes back quite some time. And the moving on from that, the idea is that if you make a choice or a stand, a clear feeling that you're going to be doing something, that you then feel a lot of pressure, both personally and from society, I guess, to kind of behave in a way that's consistent and to stick to what you said you were going to do. And that if you commit to doing something, it can lead you to thinking that you're the kind of person that does that. So you make you start saying you're going to do something, and you start kind of feeling, oh, I'm the sort of person that does this, which might actually lead you to behavioural change. Some research has been done various bits of research have been done to test around this idea about whether if you do make a pledge or a commitment to do something, are you then more likely to do it? A number of studies have been done on recycling. But there seems to be often there's a comparison with somebody asking for a pledge, sort of going door to door asking for a pledge, with some other way of getting people to recycle. And there's sometimes a bit of a confusion between whether it's actually making a pledge that gets you to recycle, or whether it's somebody nice coming to talk to you and having a chat and spending some time with you that makes you recycle. There's also been some research done around the use of seatbelts, encouraging some time ago when encouraging people to use seatbelts regularly and encouraging people to wear cycle helmets. But in both of those studies, there was a big promotional campaign alongside the sort of pledge campaign, and people were given sort of maybe things to hang up in their car to remind them, or stickers or things like that. So it's again, the pledging is kind of getting tied up with promotional campaigns and so on. There was a small experiment in 1987 on voting, on voter registration and turnout, which seemed to show quite convincingly that pledging was a good way of getting people to both register to vote and to turn out. But that was a fairly small study, and when a much larger replication was done more recently, that was actually found that the pledging wasn't particularly an effective way of getting people to do things. Running throughout all of this, there's a key difference here between if somebody pledges to do something, I think it's very well established that they are very likely to then to do it. The issue is whether having a wider pledge campaign to encourage people to do something makes them do it. Because it may be that the people who pledge and then do are just the sort of people that agree to pledge and agree to do. They're just nice, pleasant people who go along with what they're asked, or they're very altruistic, or whatever it might be. So we were keen in this research to really sort of have a good look at the impact of making a pledge or asking people to make a pledge or commitment. One of the things that runs through the research on pledging is that if you make your pledge in public, you're more likely to stick to it. So if I stand up here and write on the wall that I'm going to do something, I might be more likely to do it than if I just quietly promise myself that I might do it or whatever. So we were interested as well to explore this issue of a bit more about publicity. And in a separate strand of literature, there's largely in economics really, primarily I think it's come from, there's some ideas that people are motivated to give to charity by the publicity they might receive in part. Arely has this concept of image motivation, that while there might be other motivations as well, one of the ways that people are motivated to act for the greater good is to signal to others that they are the sort of people that do good works and that kind of thing. And they did a really interesting study where they put an exercise bike. People could cycle on an exercise bike to raise money for charity. And they found that people were more likely to do it if the exercise bike was put in a very prominent part of the gym, as opposed to just kind of tucked away in a back room. So being seen to be pro-social can be a motivator. And similarly, there's a concept of prestige. So Harbour did some work around asking people to donate money, and if you donated above a certain, the kind of donations were displayed in categories, either gold, silver, or bronze donors. And they found that if, for example, the gold level was £100, a lot of people gave 105. So they could just creep into the higher level, if you like. In voting, there's been quite a bit of work around social pressure. So they've done. There's been two kinds of research there. One is around whether people can be shamed into voting. So people are told, given information about how they voted. That gives the impression that people know how they voted last time. So they sent a letter saying, we noticed you didn't vote last time, and we'd like to encourage you to vote this time. And that idea that people can see that someone's watching what they're doing, if you like, encourages people to vote. But similarly, that can be posed in a way of pride, so thanking people for voting last time, and a much more kind of positive message, I guess there. The policy context for this is that there's quite a growing number of pledge schemes around, particularly on the internet. There's a lot of climate change pledge schemes. So people can pledge, I don't know if you've seen these websites where you can go on and say, I promise that I'm going to, switch all my electrical equipment off overnight, or I'm going to get my house lagged, or, people are making pledges that they're going to do certain kind of actions. There's quite a lot of those kind of things on the web of different kind. There's a few local councils that have got pledge schemes. So locally, Chorley Council has a Chorley Smile campaign where people can sign up to pledge that they will, volunteer in their local park, or I think you can pledge to vote, or you can pledge to keep your garden tidy, or different things like that. So we were interested in the piece of research on whether a pledge scheme can encourage people to adopt civic behaviour. And we looked at whether asking people to pledge made it more likely that they later carry out an activity, but also whether the promise of publicity would enhance that and make it even more likely that they would do the activity. So we had a children's book week in the spring of last year where people could donate a book for a charity. We worked with Community Heart, who send books from the UK out to South Africa for use to set up school libraries there. And we sent letters essentially to a lot of people asking them if they'd give a book, and then we collected them all in. The population we used was 2 electoral wards of Manchester. We were provided with a list of the postcodes by Manchester City Council, and then we used an address finder to go from those postcodes to get a list of addresses. So we had a list of all the households in those wards. We didn't have their names, so we had to just write to the resident. So the sampling unit was households rather than individuals, and we had 11,812 households across those 2 wards. And we deliberately chose the most affluent ward in the city, and then one that was, it wasn't the most deprived, but it was the 9th most deprived in the city. We had other criteria for selection as well, because we also had to have collection points for the books. So we picked areas that had local libraries and other sorts of places to drop off. We did a power calculation beforehand. I don't know if I need to go through that, but those are the details anyway. So we thought we had a decent enough size sample for the sort of differences that we might find. We didn't really have any information on what differences we might find, so we had to do a bit of estimating there. But we spoke to direct marketing companies to get some idea from them, and then went from there. So we basically, within each of those 2 wards, we randomly assigned people to one of 3 groups. We had the control group who, really rather than a control group, they were an ask-only group because they all got a letter inviting them to donate books for schools in South Africa. We had a pledge group who were asked to make a pledge that they would donate, and we had a pledge plus publicity group who were asked to pledge and also told that their details would be campaign, please donate a book. The letters were sort of just sent out in the post by a market, a research company that sends out letters. The first letter said we're going to be collecting books in this particular week, and it didn't give details of the drop-off point because we didn't want people to give books early, but it told them a bit about the charity, told them what we were doing, and if they were in the pledge group, it said we'd like you to pledge to give a book, and it encouraged a pledge card, which you can see there, which they could return back to us, but they could also pledge by email or by phone. And if they were in the publicity group, there was just a simple comment along the bottom saying a list of everyone who donates the book will be displayed locally. So that was the first letter that was sent. We then waited while people had the opportunity to pledge. So we allowed 4 weeks for people to sort of send all their pledge cards or emails or whatever back in. And then we sent a second letter to everybody, which again was a very similarly worded letter to all 3 groups. The control group simply got the letter, and the 2 groups that have been asked to pledge got a slightly different letter which said thank you very much for pledging, but then all groups were told details of the drop-off points where they could take their book during the book week. And also with that second letter they got sent a sort of envelope which they could put their books in to donate, and that was important because we needed to know who donated the books, otherwise we would just get awash with books and not know who they were from. So we had a sort of envelope and it had a code number on for each individual household, so we knew who'd given the books. Is that clear? Yeah. We had 6 drop-off points, 3 in each ward. This is a local primary school. This is Isabel Hart, who's the director of the charity, and we had these little boxes people could put their books in, and as you can see she's holding the sort of envelope we had that people put their books in. Yeah, that's that. And here's one of Peter.
It's almost flattering in photos, I think, actually. I hope I've lost a bit of weight since that photo.
Was that the intervention that inspired you to weight?
That's right, yes.
I think actually maybe the photos just been distracted or something. Anyway, so we had these, and I also want to point out behind Peter there's a poster. We had limited budget, but we did a little bit of publicity in the week or 2 before the collection campaign in the collection areas, to encourage people to donate. I should say as well that we were rather inundated with books, so you can see Peter with his handful of books, but we ended up having to they kept coming in quicker than we could clear them out, if you like, so it was quite a task in the end, but there you go. So once we'd got all these books, we bought them initially. This is an office in our building, but in the end we had to move to a warehouse because we had too many books for the office, but we had to sort all through them. We had to record the unique ID from the envelope, the number of books per donation, which drop-off point they'd come to, and the name of the person if they'd given it, we recorded. And this is all summarised here. I don't know how much, I'll go through that quickly. As you can see at the first level everybody got letter 1, and the control group just got letter 1. The pledge group got letter 1 with a pledge card, and the pledge and publicity group got letter 1 with a pledge card and the promise of publicity. Then everybody got letter 2. And I should say letter 2, the control group just got a standard letter 2 saying now's your chance, this is the date. The pledge group actually got 2 different letters because they either got a letter saying thank you for pledging if they'd pledged, or they got a letter saying the same as the control group, please donate. And that's not randomly allocated, that just is dependent on what happened at in response to the first letter. and similarly with the non-pledgers. At the next stage we received all the books, and then what we had to do was, because the pledge group had been promised publicity, we then had to write to all the other groups saying, actually, we're going to publicise your donation if you'd like to. Please contact us if you'd like to opt out of that, if you like. Otherwise they would have not been publicised, which would have been a bit unfair on them, so we had to do that. And then we created some posters which we put up in each of the 6 points saying thank you to everybody who donated, and included their names if they'd consented. So the analysis was by intent to treat, in the sense that we treated everybody as if they'd had the intervention. We had a small number of letters come back, 134. On the outside of the letters we put our return address so that we could get them back if they were demolished or empty or something like that. So we're assuming that everybody has had their letter, although we know the odd person will have just put it straight in the bin, or the cat will have ate it, or the dog or something, you know, that kind of thing. 4 people sort of contacted us to refuse at the first stage, so we didn't send them the second letter, but we included them in the analysis. We did a complementary log-log regression, which is actually the results we got were the same as if we'd done probit regression, but I think that's a good model to use if the response is rare, as our you know, where you're going to get a low response across all the groups. And we had some data, because all of these are geographically based. We could get some data from ONS on the lower super output area information, so we could include that in our modelling. So in terms of results, this is looking at who pledged. So I mean, our primary outcome of interest is who donated, but in terms of who pledged, the control group, 1 or 2 people contacted us to say, yes, I'm going to give a book, so we counted that as a pledge, but it was a tiny proportion, 0.1%. And people there was a slightly higher number of people pledged from the pledge and publicity group than from the pledge group, 5.8% compared to 5%. But although those were both significantly different from control, there weren't significantly more people pledging from the in the pledge and publicity group, although numerically more. And just as a small point, we had most people pledged by postcard, and they had to actually put a stamp on the postcard, so it did require some effort to do that. And then we had a smaller number of email pledges and some phone pledges. It's a quick summary of all the book donations that we had. So we had nearly 7,000 books from 1,000 people, all in all. We had more books overall from the more affluent ward than from the deprived ward, but in both areas, I should say, we had a much higher response than we'd anticipated, and that we'd spoken to agencies that do this kind of thing, and it was higher than they'd advised us we might expect. So I'll just run through that because I think I'm running a bit late. Okay, fine. In terms of the book donations, which is what we were particularly interested in the control group, 7.3% of people donated a book. In the pledge group, 8.2% donated, which was slightly higher, but it's not a statistically significant difference. But the pledge and publicity group donated, 8.9% of them donated, which was significantly different from the control group. And just to look at those, that sort of repeats that information again, but gives the confidence intervals. And I think if we look at those, we can see that although there's not a statistically significant difference between pledge and control, the likelihood is that there is a small effect of pledge showing there, I think. And we're seeing a clear effect of the pledge and publicity. If we just break that same information, that same table down into the areas, it's a slightly different picture going on. In the affluent area, 10% of the control group donated a book, and in that area, the pledge campaign produced a statistically significant increase in donations, as did the pledge and publicity. So both interventions seem to have been effective in the more affluent area, although the pledge and publicity was sort of, definitely more, well, I say definitely, it was a higher, although the difference between those two isn't statistically significant, if you see what I mean. And in the deprived area, I've actually left off a star there because the pledge and publicity is significantly different in that area, but the pledge group isn't. If we put that into the complementary log regression model, we're seeing in the first model on the left, you can see that I've bolded the things that are significant there, so it's repeating the same information really, that the pledge and publicity group was significantly different from control and the pledge group wasn't. In the second model, what we've done is included ward in there, and we can see then that's bringing in again what we've just seen, that there's a you know, being in a more affluent, in the more deprived ward makes it less likely you're going to give. And if we then add in the variables for the that we know about from the neighbourhood area, we can see that those results in terms of the effect of the group still hold there. Essentially, we're just controlling for these other things that we think might have an effect on book donation, and we're seeing there that deprivation and having a high proportion of retired people in an area affect donations to charity, which I don't think is particularly a surprise. Some of the other things we were slightly surprised about, that having more children in the area doesn't necessarily make it more likely, and having people who've stated that they've got a religion also doesn't make it any more likely when you've got the other things in there as well. Although I should say that some of these bits of information are quite outdated because some of them are from the last census. So I think religion in particular is from last census. So. Some other results. Of those who made a pledge, 69% went on to make a donation. So there is a clear link between pledging and donation, which is what we'd seen from the literature. And I think that really does indicate that it's useful to have done this as an experiment, so that we can separate out that it's not just those who pledge give. It's whether asking people to pledge encourages people to be giving, if you like. And of those who provided a name, people were more likely to provide a name if they were in the pledge and publicity group. So that does suggest that those in the publicity group responded in more numbers because they wanted their name known, because they're more likely to give their name than the other groups, if you like. So just to summarise, the pledge campaign on its own didn't lead to a significant rise in book donations, although I think the indications are from the figures that there was a small effect there. Combining the pledge campaign with the promise of publicity raised donations from 7.3% to 8.9%, an effect size of 22%. So it does suggest that is an effective tool to use in these kind of charitable campaigns, particularly as this is no more costly than just sending a letter. I've already made that last point. The other thing I did want to pull out is that our control group were asked to donate, and they did, just asking gave a very large response. And I think we shouldn't forget in this that is a sort of a finding, that just asking people to do things, a simple request, can be a very powerful way of getting someone to do something just in itself. I should also say that just the general amount of enthusiasm that we saw was very inspiring, really, in terms of the number of donations, the quality of books that we got. Some people had clearly gone out and bought books, or they gave us things like their school prize, or special books to them and that kind of thing. And a number of people actually went off and organised their own donations. They contacted us and said, how can I organise a donation sort of in my nursery or in my workplace or something. So that was quite heartwarming. Yeah, I've mentioned the last point, haven't I?
Just coming on a few little extra
fine.
points. And I mean, on that point of numbers of people actually giving, so if you think about it, that these postal registers are actually going to be probably quite inaccurate in terms of kind of people moving, general problems. Also, we know the post office do lose mail, and there's quite a lot of mailings going on, so the post office are losing kind of 5%. That kind of thing. So in actual fact, the actual giving from just asking could be as high as as 20-25%. We just don't know. So in a sense, I actually was quite surprised by that. And I think it's an interesting comment that, you know, some people argue, well, how much, you know, so it's quite an interesting policy question at the moment, you know, how much goodwill is there out there to kind of create some kind of more wider charitable sort of public? Well, maybe from our results, you know, there is actually some very modest kind of intervention. The other thing which I think is also, I'm quite surprised, is actual fact the promise of publicity. It was just one little tiny thing on that letter. So it's quite interesting. I often, when I get letters through the post, you know, don't even kind of read them properly. So not only are the citizens of Didsbury and Wythenshawe reading these letters properly, they're actually noticing a very small tiny bit. And in actual fact, that's actually what's causing the impact. And I think the other thing is, the one thing we slightly regret, or rather, we'd like to kind of do the research again in some way, is we weren't able to actually test that publicity effect on its own without the pledging. So you have a kind of classic kind of 2x2 design, because it'd be really interesting to actually know that. So.